25 Cole Avenue. On to agenda item number 9, presentations this evening. This evening, we're pleased to be joined by members of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Ms. Laura Rashane, District Planning Implementation and Monitoring Lead, Ms. Patricia Williams, our Plan Monitor, and Ms. Brooke Clenchy, the Senior Associate Commissioner. I'd like to welcome you this evening. Please. They are here to discuss the Accelerated Improvement Plan Quarterly Progress Report. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Rashane, and I'm here on behalf of the Center for District and School Accountability at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And with me also this evening is Senior Associate Commissioner Brooke Clenchy, as well as the Southbridge AIP Plan Monitor, Patricia Williams. So first of all, thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here. The report that Ms. Williams will be presenting addresses the period of June through September. But I thought that I would just briefly take a step back for a moment just to place the report in context, both in terms of the chronology of events in Southbridge as well as sort of the big picture of the AIP process. First of all, just wanted to acknowledge that much has changed since the last time you heard an AIP monitoring report, which I believe was back in April. So since that time, obviously there's a new district leadership team in place. There's a new AIP monitor as of July. There was an updated accelerated improvement plan that was approved by the department over the summer. So it's looks a lot different than it did in April in many ways. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Also just wanted to take a step back and look at the AIP process itself for a moment, just the big picture. So as you know, I'm sure, the goal of the AIP process is to impact student learning by helping districts to engage in what we call a continuous cycle of improvement. In other words, what we're hoping that districts will develop the capacity to do is to self-assess, to set very clear, ambitious objectives for improvement, to develop a plan to meet those objectives, to implement the plan rigorously and with fidelity, to monitor the plan, in other words, to use data to reflect about what's working and what's not working, and to modify as needed to make sure the plan is as effective as possible. And the goal is for that cycle to continue, for the plan to continuously be getting more rigorous and more focused as time goes on, and for that work to become more and more embedded in the district so that eventually support isn't needed from the department, that's something the district does on its own. So again, just in terms of context, I would really place this report, this reporting period, sort of at the beginning of that process. So district leaders during this period of June through September did a very honest self-assessment of where the district was, established very clear objectives, developed a good plan for meeting those, and began the process of implementation. So that's what you'll hear Ms. Williams talking about this evening. The next phase in that process is implementation, and that's crucial, as you know. That's when the urgent work really happens. That's when the rubber hits the road of improving teaching and learning throughout the district so that every student in Southbridge gets a quality education every day. And so the next AIP report, which will probably be in around January, will focus on the quality of implementation during the next period, as well as the ways that the district is using data to assess what's working and what's not working and making modifications. So anyway, I'm here if you have questions. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Pat to discuss this report focused on June through September.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here tonight and to meet all of you for the first time. I'm reporting, as Laura said, on June through September activity under Southbridge's 2014-2015 Accelerated Improvement Plan, known to all of us as the AIP. As Laura has pointed out, Southbridge got approval of its AIP soon after its submission and was able to devote considerable time during the summer to curriculum work, to revising the Southbridge Standard, and to detailed planning for the year. The summer planning was important in a year when the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and all principals were either new to the district or new to their positions. Under Strategic Objective 1, which is develop, refine, and implement curricula for all K-12 core subjects and instructional practices aligned to the Common Core and WIDA standards, a great deal of work was done in this area. Teachers in the district logged over 1,000 hours writing curriculum this summer. As a result, K-12 math curriculum maps are complete. K-5 English language arts curriculum maps for reading are complete, and curriculum guides 6 to 12 in ELA are also complete. Also, the district this fall is implementing a new and much-needed literacy program, National Geographic's Reach for Reading series, and training for the implementation is underway. Additional important work completed this summer includes the revision of the Southbridge Standard. The Southbridge Standard lists key instructional strategies that the district promotes and expects to have in place in classrooms. It guides what administrators look for when they observe in classrooms and when they conduct learning walks. A detailed district calendar lists monthly district learning walks, and individual schools are also doing their own learning walks. These learning walks involve administrators and teachers doing 20-minute observations in a series of classrooms to get snapshots of the teaching and learning taking place. The learning walks result in a chart that summarizes the day's observations, and they result in a report back to the classroom teachers on what was observed. Strategic Objective 2, expand and embed the use of data K-12 to foster a cycle of continuous improvement aimed at assessing and improving instructional practices throughout the district. Southbridge is collecting data in many areas, from monthly reports from principals concerning areas such as attendance, failure reports, and discipline, from quarterly content exams at the high school, and from learning walks. An area of critical concern is the MCAS results in Southbridge for English language learners and students with disabilities. The district has recently done an analysis of the reasons for these students' low achievement and is drafting plans for addressing their instructional needs. These plans, when complete, represent a key to improving student achievement in Southbridge. Strategic Objective 3, improve educator quality and ability to implement rigorous and ongoing instruction. Implementation of the educator evaluation system is central to the achievement of this objective. A record of the activity under this initiative is available to district administrators electronically on what is called TeachPoint. District administrators will be monitoring the quality of the feedback provided to teachers by principals following classroom observations. DLT meetings, district leadership team meetings with principals, are also intended to serve as professional development for their growth as instructional leaders. In a recent DLT meeting that I attended, principals reviewed the school's MCAS results with one another as a group. The monitor did not receive evidence regarding Strategic Objective 4, which is increased parent and community involvement to enhance student learning, so I'll be reporting on that at a later time. This is a report on early implementation of activities that support the Accelerated Improvement Plan. The district has planned well and will be collecting evidence concerning student achievement, as well as regarding the quality of classroom instruction and of principal leadership. Future quarterly progress reports will provide detailed information concerning progress made toward achieving each AIP objective. I'd like to read the next steps that I included at the very end of the report. Ensure teacher implementation of the curriculum maps that were developed over the summer, one of the district's achievements. Continue curriculum development in content areas not yet addressed. Train principals, instructional resource specialists, and teachers in the implementation of the new literacy program. Review, communicate, and implement the plans for improvement in the delivery of instruction to English language learners and students with disabilities. As I say, this is a key focus for Southbridge. Establish a system for collection, review, and response to data concerning principals' roles as instructional leaders. Continue to use DLT meetings as professional development opportunities for administrators. And finally, ensure meaningful implementation of the educator evaluation system at all levels. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, or to include my friends from the state if you have questions.
Anybody have any questions? Dr. Page?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a, thank you. I have a question. You mentioned something in the very beginning about conducting these 20-minute teaching and learning walks where you're going to be evaluating teaching and learning. Could you give me an example in the context of what kind of information will be collected during that period of time for both of those two attributes, and what kind of action plans?
I can give you a quick example, but I think the district people would do a better job. The Southbridge Standard lists 7 instructional strategies that the district hopes will be in use in classrooms. And I know that the district learning walks, when they occur and do this 20-minute observation, each classroom they go into, they're looking for 4 of the 7 instructional strategies. So they keep a record of what they observe in each of these successive classrooms as they go along. And I'd be happy to yield to anyone from the district who wants to add to that.
Yeah, so I guess if I may follow up. Now, I'm more interested in the learning part in terms of how the learning is going to be assessed, because if you're going in, I'm trying to sort of walk myself through what would occur, and you can walk in and say, okay, yeah, the teacher's doing everything, check, 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 but how is the learning part being assessed in the context of that kind of thing? I'm curious to hear how that assessment's going to be as to whether or not learning is being achieved.
Thanks. Thank you. So as the learning walks progress over the year, one of the things that will happen is teachers, administrators will work together, become more familiar with the tool, and they will start to include looking at student work, examining student work as it's occurring, and actually asking students, without disrupting the classroom, about what they're learning, and if they feel that reteaching is occurring, if they feel that the teacher is able to differentiate for them, given their level, if they're below grade level or above grade level. So those are things that we move toward as we become familiar with the process.
Okay. So it's almost like the people that are conducting these will be putting the students through many quizzes, saying,
more like a conversation. I think when the associate commissioner came and was discussing, asking students questions about how they felt about school, it's more like that.
Okay.
So it's getting the student perspectives.
So asking a student how they feel about school is very different from whether or not it's ascertaining whether they're learning the concept that's being taught at that
So the next thing we do is we start to gather student work.
Yeah.
And that might not occur in a learning walk. That may occur at grade level meetings or at department meetings, where we start to compare student work samples, and we generate exemplars of student work so that we're raising the expectation for student outcome.
Okay. So that's something that really comes in the context of, sort of an after-the-fact analysis and not actually during that walk.
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to clarify in my mind that I understand, what all of this is. So really what you're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just paraphrasing what I'm understanding, is that you're assessing the teacher's ability, or you're basically assessing what the teachers are doing, not necessarily whether or not the students are absorbing information at that particular time.
Well, if I might, I think part of what we're doing is, having been here last year, particularly the high school, middle school, quite frankly, when we did learning walks, we saw stage on the stage or chalk and talk. So we were at a point in where this district's progress was, that we needed to provide professional development to teachers to develop instruction and curriculum better so that it became more student-focused. So a lot of what we're doing with Focus on Results and much of what we're doing with our professional development and in our data meetings with teachers is to make students become involved and to make students become a part of their learning more than having a teacher standing up talking to them for 50 minutes, which was pretty prevalent. Elementary teachers have never really been able to get away with that, but you know, high school teachers can say turn to page 20 and do the 9 questions and have a much better chance of that. So it's a piece that works together. So yes, I mean, quite frankly, you can't go in and tell what a 13-year-old is thinking ever. If you can, I'd love to write that book, and I would probably be on a beach somewhere. But not knowing that, you can go in and look to see what students are producing, the conversations that they're having, and you can see if it's tied to their curriculum. And we are often offering professional developments to teachers that focus on best practices in the classroom, so that when we go in, we have something that we feel like students will feel better with. So many times teachers teach in a silo, especially in the high school, middle school. We want students to go into a classroom and feel some continuity with the classroom that they were just in manner of questioning, in manner of responses, and all of those things will come back to help us close our gaps on MCAS, ANET, and other testing. I mean, ultimately, in a state like Massachusetts and pretty much anyone else, we're a testing state. So, I mean, ultimately, our numbers come, you know, when we test them. We're devising some benchmark testing. Although it was said that there were curriculum maps made in the past few years, we found that they were not. So we've had to do those. So now teachers have something that they follow that's more uniform. So there's a lot more to it than just a really cut and dried answer of what we're looking at. It's about a million things.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So another issue is there's a lot of focus, as I can imagine, as you know, we see on ELL and students with disabilities. Yes. However, when I look at the data, in a lot of the categories, it's very difficult to differentiate between the general population and specifically those populations in terms of individual performance. It seems like we're performing very low all across the board. And so and maybe that's because we have such a high population of students in certain categories that it's difficult to, I mean, you can carve them out from the general population, but if you compare some of those numbers with the general population, they don't really look a lot different. And so is there a way to assess that data? I mean, is there a way of looking at, say, non-low income students without disabilities and saying, are they really achieving at this hugely higher level than these other populations? Because the way I look at the way the data is presented by the DESC, it's very difficult to determine that. And it almost looks like we have low or underperformance overall.
And that's accurate. You do have low student performance in Southbridge, but, and I don't have the data in front of me, but what we refer to is what's called a learning gap between that of the school population overall, Southbridge, all students, we put a capital ALL right next to it, and that of ELL students and students with disabilities, and there is a gap. You are overall in the lower ranks, but there is a serious gap, and it's one that the district administration and teachers are, I got a copy in the mail this afternoon of the plan that's been developed to address that. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but it is a very serious responsibility of the district. The gap is important and needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on this side with questions? Over here, questions? Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first question that I have is in regards to the Accelerated Improvements Plan process in general. I said that at this stage we're at the, we did self-assessment and we're going to be implementing. We've had multiple plans, accelerated improvement plans. How long does a plan go for? This current plan has been approved. How long will we be working off and implementing this plan?
Yep, that's a great question. Thank you. So you're right. There have been multiple plans in Southbridge. First of all, just want to emphasize that this is the first time that a plan has been approved so early in the year and has been demonstrably implemented. So as you can see, our plan monitors in all districts, but Pat has a particular strength in this, being on the ground, and actually she has seen and collected a lot of evidence and data showing that there has been implementation and fidelity to the plan so far. We require, in terms of the AIP process, we require districts to submit an AIP annually. So this particular plan would need to be updated in the course of things by the end of the year or over the summer. And in terms of how long the process takes in different districts, it really varies. That cycle of improvement that I mentioned, what we're looking for is that each part of that is really embedded in the district. And there's sort of a phasing out process that we do in districts that are ready for that. Southbridge is not at that point yet, but we are optimistic that the district will get there. So.
I guess the observation is, we set a plan. Granted, I think it's phenomenal that our plan was approved prior to the start of school, which in no way, shape, or form is a small miracle due to very hard work from a significant amount of people. But with multiple plans, we've only gotten to we've set the plan, we're starting to implement. How is this, you talk about a cycle of improvement.
Right.
We seem to start, go back, and start and go back, and we haven't ever come through a full cycle.
Right.
So would the hope be that this year, having been approved early, we'll get through an entire cycle and then not necessarily recreate a new plan to implement, but change things at a higher level and more focused?
Exactly, and the way I explained it may have been a little too linear, so it's not, 2 months this, 3 months that, it's,
No.
But right, absolutely. So our hope would be, now that there's a viable plan in place, that the implementation of that plan would be high quality, rigorous, relentless, that there would be reflection on how it's working, changes would be made during the year, and then when that plan is updated, it really is an update, because the district throughout the year has been looking at data, has been making tweaks, has been looking at student work, looking at the results of other benchmarks. So the next plan really should be a more rigorous, more focused version of the one that's there now.
A deepening and extending. So the success would be to have a good plan in place for a year and then move it to a higher level, not put in place a whole new plan at the end of the year.
That makes sense. And is there any evidence or reason that this particular plan was approved so quickly versus the ones in the past? Like, what changed? What's different? Mm-hmm. What are we doing right? That would be nice to share.
That's a great question. I think a few things happened. One was, so there was a plan that was submitted last spring, and so we were able to work with the district on sort of which parts of that to keep and which parts needed more, we needed a lot more specificity. Mm-hmm. So this plan was a lot more specific than what we've received in the past from Southbridge, more clear, and the other piece of this is that, we're constantly evaluating ourselves as well. And one piece of feedback that we received from districts, loud and clear, was that when we were giving feedback on AIPs, it really wasn't as helpful as it could have been. And so there were probably times, quite honestly, where Southbridge heard from us and we probably weren't as clear as we could have been about what needed to improve, even though our intent was, of course, to be as clear as possible. And so what we did this year was we actually met with the district, with Superintendent Gardner and her team, before we officially reviewed the plan. So we looked at a draft. The accountability team at the department came up with a number of questions. We're able to learn more in person about the plan. We're able to give some feedback and have the district really engage with us, ask questions about what we meant, what we were looking for. And I think, and district leaders can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that process resulted also in a more effective plan. Yes.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions. Sorry. The monitoring report, so the next coming report will then describe those progress towards our benchmark. So we've kind of laid out the first steps. We have these things in place. This is how we're going to accomplish them. And then the results that we should be starting to see.
The
would be
progress toward those goals should be clearer and more specific in the next
in
report.
that next report. Regarding the focus on ELL and students with special needs, I want to clarify again, this report is from June to September.
Yes.
So things that coming on of that ELL, half something else person, and assessing, doing WEDA testing and that sort of stuff is so that process has started, but we're not getting a report on the impact of that as of yet. Is that would be more of that implementation piece for the next in January.
Yeah, I think the plan is still under, both plans are still under review, and so implementation would follow that.
And I thought, seeing as we've discussed the Southbridge Standard, I don't think anybody in the community knows what the Southbridge Standard is and what those 7 things are. So I'm just going to read them very quickly. It's learning objectives so that they're, and the expectation is not for students, but for teachers and instructional support staff. So in a learning objective that will be articulated, what the students will learn and be able to do in every classroom every day. Collaboration and cooperation, working together to develop and deliver instruction using shared strategies and resources. Differentiated instruction, which is scaffolding and instruction to meet the needs of all learners. Varied instructional strategies, using a variety of instructional strategies, groupings, and room arrangements to promote student acquisition of the learning objective. Learning resources, use classroom materials which support the learning objective, interactive word walls, manipulatives, number lines, etc. Higher order thinking, modeling, and facilitating a high level of discourse to include multiple questioning strategies and the use of Bloom's taxonomy and activate higher order thinking skills. And assessment, which I think is what Dr. Page was referring to, a use of a variety of authentic assessment strategies to evaluate student acquisition of learning objectives and to continuously inform instruction. So it's not that when people go in that they're necessarily assessing the learning per se, but that they're assessing that a tool is in place to assess that learning. And that the instructional strategies are in place in order to impact that student learning and hopefully in turn raise our MCAS scores and get us moving forward from being the low performing district that we are, moving us out of that. So I think for the community, we talk about things up here and we have them in front of us, but a lot of people have no idea what we're talking about. So 4 of those 7 things would be clearly outlined, that would be checked off. In
Would be focused
walks.
on in the district learning walks,
Right.
and it may be a different orientation in a school learning walk. It could vary.
And the idea is that that's not just happening when a learning walk is, but a learning walk could happen at any time, and these things would be observed ongoing.
When the principal is there, when the instructional...
when nobody's there, just our kids.
No one's there but the learners.
Absolutely. The last question I had was, in your summary, over the last 4 months, careful and targeted planning for improvement in instruction and outcomes had occurred. Can you talk about what that was, what this planning looked like, how that came about? And
It's complicated, and probably the district could add much more to it, but for example, when I started as a monitor, there was a calendar, and the district learning walks were laid out month by month. The meetings of the district leadership team was laid out month by month. There is a protocol for each of the teams that are occurring as to who's present, how they take minutes, and turning in the minutes. There's it's laid, there's a district dashboard now that every principal turns in, which gives a summary of, here's what the discipline has looked like, here's what attendance looks like, here's the number of classroom observations I did. So there's a way of collecting evidence that if that is now then well done, should yield good evidence.
So is this the first time that these systems have been put in place?
I can't answer that because I'm new.
Yeah, I think really, for us, the focus is on this period. We can't really comment too much on what was and what wasn't in place
Well, I'm
before.
just, if we're continuing, my concern is that if we're continuing to set up systems and then changing the system every year, that's not really closing a loop and
Right.
having an ongoing, continuous cycle of improvement. It's kind of that stop-start. I didn't know if Ms. Diaz, can you speak to anything about that? I see you're out there. Going across. Certainly, I said that they explained some of the systems that have been put in place to collect the data and support ongoing learning, and my question was, are these new systems that haven't been put in place? Have they not been implemented? How?
One of the things that I think is really clear about the district right now is that there are structures and systems in place to ensure implementation. So for instance, the dashboards talk about how student interventions are happening, how many students need intervention, what are the interventions, how many observations have been done, how principals are rating teachers, which will happen more at the end of the year. So there's a lot of information being collected, which I don't think was collected before.
Okay, that makes sense. And this is the first time we've ever kind of gotten a little good news on our AIP, and knowing that it's moving forward, I want to just have clarity that no matter what happens from this point on, we have the systems in place to support the learning, despite who our plan manager is at any given time, that we're moving in that direction and things are in place that are going to stay in place to continue that cycle.
That's absolutely important, that the district is able to show that the systems and the structures will ensure a continual curriculum, it's continual improvement.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change from month to month, or year to year. And I know that's something the school committee has been concerned about.
Thank you. That is all that I have, which I'm sure you all think is plenty.
Is there anything else on this side? Mrs. Donovan? Oh, sorry, Chris. Mrs. Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Pat.
Glad to meet you all.
I don't know who can answer this. A couple of the questions that I have, Ms. Williams, are questions that were actually part of your report, even though you did not mention them in your brief summary.
Yes.
So, and again, this particular question, I don't know if it would be more appropriate for you to answer, or perhaps somebody from our district learning team. Under objective number 2, it's actually the very first line of our page 3, talking about, the district with certain plans that they're putting in place. And one of the things that was written in this report said that the district is planning to develop monthly open response common assessments. And then subsequent to that, quarterly high school ELA and math assessments have not yet been addressed. I don't know if you could explain what that means. That was the first time I'd seen that.
Those are two separate things.
Yep.
The second thing you mentioned, the quarterly high school English and math
Yeah.
exams, at the point at which I wrote this report, they had not been developed. I can tell you, outside of this report, I was at a recent highlights meeting, and they are now developed and are in place. So
Okay.
I can address that.
Okay.
I can't so well address the open response.
It's the first time I'd heard of that. I mean, I don't know if that's related to answering an open response question on an MCAS, or am I
Yes.
off? Is that
Oh,
what
yeah.
that's what we're
Oh, yeah.
doing? Because we know that that's an area that some kids aren't even attempting to answer, so are we looking to see who's answering or not attempting, or?
Do you want?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So when you look at some of our data for MCAS, one of the glaring issues is our students' lack of attention to open response and the number of zeros that they take. So the goal of the district is to improve that, and to improve that, it is to give students consistent practice, also to teach them protocols to address, and also to figure out, is the open response lack of answer due to the fact that students aren't comfortable writing, or is it because they do not understand understand either the text that they read or the question. So a lot of work over this year will be around providing opportunities for students to do open responses, to share those, and then to gather student work to assess our students
Okay.
improving. So
Okay,
that's the
I thought it
goal
was
of
on
that.
that line, but I wasn't sure. Okay, thank you for that clarification. The second question that I had, or just for clarification before you sit down real quick, but you can just nod your head if you need to. Our new literacy program, the National Geographic, I just want to clarify, that's just a K through 12 program. I mean K through 5, K through 5. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I got rollerblades the other day. They would be helpful. Yes, it's a K-5 program. I would like to introduce to school committee that we've also purchased OWL curriculum for the pre-K. It's very important that we know and understand our youngest students' literacy skills, and that we address them with intervention early so that as they progress, they are not caught behind. And so the teachers aren't forced to do catch-up work, but they are just able to stay with their curriculum. With that being said, we did have our middle school reading teachers come to see the National Geographic Reach for Reading program, and so we will be looking at curriculum specific to reading for the middle school and high school as well.
Does the National Geographic have an extension program that would cover those grade levels, or would we be looking at something
We're going to be looking
similar?
at it and comparing.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thank
Just
you.
like the curriculum committee did with National Geographic, we'll do the same at the secondary
Okay.
level.
All right, thank you very much. And then my final question, Ms. Williams, was in the note that you had at the very last part of your report. Since the report covers a period spanning 2 AIPs, ratings are not provided. I wasn't sure what ratings or rankings are you referring to, and what type of ranking system will you be providing in the future?
Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. So usually AIP monitoring reports do include ratings, and so we look at each strategic initiative in the plan, and we look at basically 2 elements. So we look at how embedded the practices are, the strategies that that initiative addresses, and also how far along the district is to meeting the goals for that objective.
Okay.
So each initiative will be getting 2 ratings
Okay.
going forward.
Okay, thank you very
And then you
much.
can compare report to report whether you've had an improvement in the rating that you've
Sure.
got under a particular objective.
Okay, very good. All right, I'm all set. Thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Oliva?
Through you, Madam Chair, I only have one question, in that you said that the next report would be due in January. Can you give us a rough estimate as to what the timeframe in January looks like?
So actually, I was a little bit tentative, and the reason for that is that we're planning to work with district leaders to find out what exact schedule would work based on the AIP, so that the next report can include the results of some benchmarks. Some districts have a trimester system, some districts have a quarterly system, so we're trying to be a little bit more flexible this year and work kind of in tandem with the AIP and with that schedule. So I'd be happy to give you more specifics, but I actually don't have that information yet. I'll be communicating more with Superintendent Gardner and her team, and would be happy to get back to you on that.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
I just have a question. Thank you again for coming this evening. We sincerely appreciate it. Regarding next steps, are these next steps as of the date of the report, or are these the next steps that were listed as at the end of the period? So in other words, has action already begun on these next steps, or are we supposed to take these next steps and move them forward?
Yeah, some of them are, I write these as I write the report, which is usually right
Okay.
at the, so I read them because they're so specific, but you can assume that some of them are
In
underway.
new place. Okay.
And if I could just add too, I mean, we offer these as suggestions based on the monitor's observations, but it's really a complex effort figuring out which of these should be prioritized. There are probably very important next steps that aren't in this list as well. So it's
Right.
just some guidance.
Understood. Thank you. Is there anything else from the school committee? Ms. Gardner, did you want to add anything? You did.
I would just like to thank, first of all, Laura Shane, who I believe last February came to our aid when we were struggling with getting this accomplished. And because we had looked at previous plans, and when we looked at where we were, they didn't seem to match what we were doing. So we had great help to sort of start in the middle, and we said last year many times that if our year last year had started in April, we would have had a fantastic year. But because of that, we started off extremely well this year. Sally Dias came to us, Pat Jackman, who has joined us tonight, and we were very, very fortunate in the summer to get Pat Williams. And so it's been, when you say AIP, you don't often say fun, but they've been really fun to work with. They've been tough, and they've made us really think about what we're doing and where we're going. And I think the greatest thing about working with all of you is that you have made us in the district here and our administrators, our greatest focus has been on the through line to students and how we make them better students and close those gaps. But I really appreciate that you have helped us continue with that focus and to really be our partners. And prior to all of you stepping in, we didn't feel that partnership. So it's always good when the DESE comes and really helps us with where we are to get to where we need. So I would like to thank all of you.
Thank you very much. It's our pleasure. We appreciate it.
Does Brooke want to say something?
The air is dry in here. I was just saying to Mr. Long, I have been actually in Superintendent Gardner's position in Winchendon for 5 years, and Winchendon was declared underperforming at about the same time. The challenges are great, and there is such a longing to get out of that level for peace. And you want the best for your children, and I so understand that. When I looked over your AIP tonight, I'd reviewed it earlier, and I refreshed my memory on it tonight. I really believe with my heart that you are in the right direction. And as I sat here and listened to the presentation tonight, I heard the things that I know that we went after in Winchendon, the early literacy component, the learning walks. I know one of your school committee members had some questions about that, and rightfully so. But honestly, when they're implemented with fidelity, they are an incredible process to use. The new reading and the new literacy component that you're going after, spot on. So much of what you have in this plan is so doable. And I just know that when you come out of this on the other side, you will feel amazing. I just remember when that label was removed for us, and you just wanted to go out and celebrate in the streets, like, yes, we finally did this, you know. So, you know, I had just said to Mr. Long, my heart I just so feel for where you're at right now. But having lived on the other side and going through the painstaking process of getting there, when it's all over, you feel so incredible about what you've done for your children. And I know that you want the very, very best for your children. And I really believe that this plan will put you there. You know, as we were talking to coming in, you've got some incredible opportunities in front of you right now. You really do. You're going to have some fresh starts with some principals and such. I really think that you're on the right path, and we are so pulling for you because you had mentioned, Madam Chair, the whole notion of shedding that level 4, and I so hope that you're able to do this, but I do think you're on the right track. So I thank you very much for some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate it.